How's it going, everybody? We are continuing with our series on how every Major League Baseball team got their name, and we are now at the National League Central. The Chicago Cubs started back in 1870 and were first calling themselves the Chicago White Stockings. Over the years, they changed it several times unofficially. Among them were the Colts and the Orphans. Now, they called themselves the Orphans because their favorite manager had left the team. They considered themselves fatherless, so they were orphans. In 1902, they officially started calling themselves the Cubs, and this name went back a few years earlier. A Cub was the slang term at the time for a young baseball player, and since they were made up of a bunch of young players, a newspaper writer started calling them the Young Chicago Cubs. That name stuck. More and more writers started calling them that, and they made it official in 1902. Milwaukee is a big baseball city. They got the Braves in '53, where Hank Aaron made his debut, but they've had a pro team or a semi-pro baseball team there in Milwaukee ever since the late 1800s, and they had names like the Creams, because it's the Cream City, the Grays, and of course, one of the longest running teams were the Milwaukee Brewers. It was a minor league team that existed up until 1953 when the Braves moved to town. Now, of course, the name Brewer is a nod to the city's rich heritage of making beer, and it's actually called America's beer capital. Now, the Brewers that we know now began life as the Seattle Pilots, as an expansion team that started in the mid-60s. Now, they got their name because their team president at the time was a part-time harbor pilot. Bud Selig bought the team after the Braves left for Atlanta, and he moved the team to his hometown of Milwaukee. Now, he went with the name Brewers because of that minor league team that he had remembered growing up. This team was formed in 1869 by a guy named Harry Wright. He called them the Red Stockings because of the high red socks that they wore. He left the team and founded the Boston Red Stockings that eventually became the Boston Braves. And then the Cincinnati Red Stockings were reformed in 1876 and joined the National League. But they were banned because they served beer at their games and they wanted to play on Sundays. They fled to the American Association, which we now call Major League Baseball, and shortened that name to the Reds. And then they were readmitted into the National League in 1890. However, in the 50s, Reds were associated with communists, so the team decided to change their name officially to the Redlegs. And then after the whole McCarthy thing was over in 1959, they went back to calling themselves the Cincinnati Reds. Now, popular legend says that this team started in 1890, and they went by the name the Pittsburgh Alleghenies. That's in reference to the Allegheny River in Pennsylvania. Now, that team played in the American Association League until they joined the National League in 1887. Then a rival players league formed, and many of the Alleghenies players left to play in that league. That league failed, and all these players had to go back to their old teams playing in the National League. But there was a second baseman from the Philadelphia Athletics that decided not to go back to the A's, but to go to the Alleghenies instead. Now, this caused a big stink, which led someone at the A's to tell a reporter that the Pittsburgh team pirated their guy.
No, Captain Choke!
They pirated him away from them. From that point, newspaper writers in Pittsburgh loved the name Pirates because of that. And in 1891, they just made the name official, the Pittsburgh Pirates. In 1881, the St. Louis Brown Stockings became the St. Louis Browns. Now, the first big rivalry in the kind of Midwest area who played in the professional baseball series, which is the forerunner to the World Series, was the St. Louis Browns versus the Chicago White Stockings. Those teams are still rivals today. You just know them as the Chicago Cubs and the St. Louis Cardinals. In 1900, they renamed the team to the Cardinals, basically for the same reason that the Arizona Cardinals were called the Cardinals when they started in Chicago. It was due to the color of red that they picked out for their new uniforms in 1899. A newspaper writer overheard someone say that it was a beautiful shade of cardinal and started calling them the St. Louis Cardinals. It stuck, and they soon officially became the Cardinals. Well, if you had a team in Cardinal Reds, you couldn't call them the Browns anymore, so I guess they had to change the name. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what you saw, please hit subscribe, support the channel. You can also follow entire episodes of the Couch Warmers podcast on our website at firepitsports.com, and we are also on Apple and Spotify.